Ambassador Deho looked around the giant meeting room and felt his anger growing stronger with every passing minute. The room was made of some kind of blue crystal that seemed to glow from inside, and floating screens showed pictures and numbers. That hurt his eyes to look at. Directly 3 months he had been sitting in this same chair listening to alien creatures talk about humans like they were stupid children who had wandered into a room full of adults. The Vortani delegate was speaking. Again his voice came through the translation machine as a cold mechanical sound that made Deho want to throw something. The creature looked like a giant insect with too many arms and eyes that never seemed to blink. It was explaining why Earth needed to give up most of its military ships as a sign of good faith. Deho counted the other humans in the room. Somin sat to his right, her face calm, but her hands clenched tight under the table. Te-Wu was taking notes, but Deho could see the anger in his eyes. Hanji was the youngest of their group, and she looked like she wanted to scream. The aliens had been treating them this way for months, and it was getting worse every day. What made it worse was how the aliens acted like they were being generous. The Korathi ambassador with his fish-like gills and wet skin had actually said yesterday that humans should be grateful for the chance to learn from superior civilizations. The Nexari delegate, who looked like a walking pile of rocks, had suggested that maybe humans were not ready for real space travel yet. Deho remembered the first day they had arrived at this station. The human ships had looked small and simple compared to the massive alien vessels the aliens had greeted them with what seemed like politeness, but he could see the amusement in their strange eyes. They thought humans were a joke. The worst part was the way they discussed human affairs without asking for human input. The Threx Collective wanted to put monitoring stations in human space to make sure Earth was following galactic law. The Zephyrin Republic suggested that human trade should be limited until humans proved they could handle advanced technology. The Vortani Empire thought human military forces should be reduced to prevent any accidents. Every suggestion was presented as helpful advice from wise older species to their young human neighbors. But Deho knew what it really was. It was the way adults talked about taking toys away from children who might hurt themselves. None of these creatures saw humans as equals. They saw them as primitives who needed to be controlled. And Deho looked at the holographic display showing Earth and felt a surge of pride. The blue and green planet looked beautiful even in the sterile light of the alien technology. His people had built cities that reached into the sky. They had cured diseases that had killed millions. They had learned to travel between stars in just a few decades after discovering they were not alone. But none of that mattered to the aliens sitting around this crystal table. They only saw a young species that had barely left its home system. They saw creatures who still fought wars among themselves and who had not yet learned to think in terms of galactic politics. They saw humans as problems to be managed, not partners to be respected. The Vortani delegate was still talking about ship reductions when something inside Deho finally snapped. He had listened to 3 months of condescending lectures. He had smiled politely while aliens discussed taking away human rights. He had tried to be diplomatic while creatures who had never set foot on Earth decided what was best for humanity. Deho stood up so fast that his chair made a loud, scraping sound against the crystal floor. The holographic displays flickered as his movement disturbed some kind of sensor. The alien delegates turned their various eyes and sensory organs toward him with expressions that might have been surprise if he could read their faces. "We are done here," he said, and his voice carried clearly through the translation system. The words came out harder and colder than he had intended, but he did not care anymore. He was tired of being polite to creatures who treated his entire species like backward children's. Min stood up next, her diplomatic training warring with the anger that Deho could see in her eyes. Te-Wu closed his notebook with a snap that sounded very loud. In the sudden quiet, Hyunji pushed back her chair and gathered her papers with quick, angry movements. The Korathi ambassador made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter but sounded more like water gurgling down a drain running away. "So soon," he said with obvious amusement. "We expected more patience from a species that claims to be civilized." The comment hit exactly where it was meant to hurt. It revealed what the aliens really thought about human civilization. They did not see Earth as a planet full of thinking beings with their own culture and achievements. They saw a world full of barely evolved animals who were playing at being civilizado began gathering the human delegation papers and files while the aliens whispered among themselves in languages that sounded like static and musical notes and grinding stone. None of them seemed worried about the humans leaving. In fact, some of them looked relieved, like parents whose annoying children had finally decided to go play somewhere else. The Nexari delegate made a comment in his own language that caused several other aliens to make sounds that might have been laughter. The translation system did not pick up the words, but Deho did not need to understand the language to know they were being mocked. As the human delegation walked toward the exit, Deho felt the weight of every alien gaze on his back. They were probably already discussing how to divide up human territory among themselves, or planning what kind of puppet government they would install on Earth. The thought made his jaw clench, but he kept walking. The corridor outside the meeting room was long and curved with walls that seemed to be made of the same glowing crystal as the chamber. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the alien architecture. Somin walked beside him, and he could hear her controlled breathing. She was as angry as he was, but her diplomatic training was still holding. "We tried," Hyenji said quietly as they reached the docking bay where their shuttle waited. "We really tried to make this work." Deho looked back one last time at the station where they had spent 3 months being insulted and dismissed. The massive structure looked like a piece of abstract art, floating in space, beautiful and cold and completely alien. He wondered if any of the creatures inside understood what they had just lost. "They think we need them," he said as they boarded the shuttle, "but maybe it's time they learned that they need us." The shuttle doors closed with a soft hiss, and Deho felt something settle in his chest. It was not defeat, it was determination. The aliens had made their choice when they decided to treat humanity as inferiors. Now humanity would make its own choices about how to move forward in a galaxy full of creatures who thought they knew better. As their ship pulled away from the station and jumped to hyperspace, Deho was already thinking about the message he would send to Admiral Yuanwu back on Earth. The military had been preparing for this possibility. If diplomacy failed, then humanity would find another way to earn respect among the stars. The aliens would learn soon enough that they had made a very big mistake. 6 months had passed since the human ships left the Galactic Council station, and not a single message had come from Earth. The alien civilizations barely noticed this silence. They were too busy with their usual problems. The Nexari Empire was trying to take over 3 new star systems. The Threx Collective was demanding the right to mine asteroids in neutral space. The Zephyrin Republic was threatening to stop trading with anyone who disagreed with their new shipping laws. Chairman Veltar sat in his office made of living crystal that grew from the walls and floor. His skin looked like purple glass, and when light hit it the right way, it threw rainbow colors across the room. He was reading reports about border disputes and trade arguments. None of the reports mentioned humans at all. It was like Earth had simply vanished from galactic politics. The chairman found this amusing. In a way, humans had made such a big show of walking out of the peace talks, but now they were hiding in their little corner of space like children who had taken their toys and gone home. He expected them to come crawling back within a few months, begging to be allowed back into civilized galactic society. But Earth was not hiding. Earth had become busier than it had ever been in human history. Dr. Minho stood in the largest laboratory complex ever built on the planet. The facility stretched for miles underground, with thousands of scientists working day and night. The air hummed with the sound of machines and computers and the excited voices of researchers who were making breakthrough after breakthrough. Minho looked tired, but his eyes were bright with excitement. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night for the past 6 months, but the work was too important to stop. Every day brought new discoveries. Every test revealed possibilities that no human had imagined before the peace talks failed. His assistant Unji ran toward him holding a tablet with data that made her hands shake with excitement. "Doctor, you need to see this," she said, her voice high with amazement. "We did it. We actually did it." Minho took the tablet and read the numbers twice before he believed them. The energy core they had been working on was producing 30% more power than the original alien design. The alien technology had seemed impossibly advanced when they first studied it, but human engineering had found ways to make it better. "How is this possible?" he asked, looking at the test results. Again, the aliens have been using this technology for thousands of years. Xianji grinned and pulled up another screen showing the manufacturing process. They use rare materials from specific planets, she explained, but we found a way to get the same results using common elements that we can find anywhere. The human approach is completely different from theirs across the laboratory complex. Dr. Sungmin was working on weapons technology. The samples the aliens had shared during trade negotiations were now spread across dozens of work tables. Human scientists had taken apart every piece of alien equipment they could get their hands. On Sungmin discovered that alien weapons were designed to be powerful but simple. The creatures who made them seemed to prefer brute force over clever engineering, but humans approached the problem differently. They found ways to make weapons that were smaller, lighter, and more accurate than anything the aliens used. The breakthrough came when Sungmin realized that human computer technology was actually more advanced than what most alien species used. The aliens had focused on making their machines bigger and stronger, but humans had learned to make their computers faster and smarter. Admiral Yuanwu walked through the orbital shipyards that now surrounded Earth like a metal ring. The construction work never stopped. Ships were being built faster than anyone had thought possible. The designs looked human, but they incorporated all the improvements that the scientists had discovered. Captain Jihai brought her test ship back to the main construction platform after another successful flight. The vessel moved through space like it was dancing rather than flying. Every system worked better than the blueprints had promised. The weapons could hit targets at impossible distances. The shields could absorb damage that would destroy most alien ships. Admiral, we have a problem, Jihai said as she climbed out of her ship, but her smile showed it was a good kind of problem. What kind of problem? Yuanwu asked. The ship is too fast, she explained. Our navigation computers can't keep up with the speed the engines can produce. We need to upgrade all the computer systems to match the new propulsion technology. Yuanwu looked out at the dozens of ships under construction. Each one represented capabilities that would surprise the alien species who had dismissed human technology. The aliens thought they knew what humans could build, but they had never seen human determination combined with alien science. The most important work was happening in the intelligence division. Commander Haewon sat in a room filled with screens showing star maps and shipping routes. Human spy satellites had been watching alien space for months, learning everything about how the galactic civilizations operated. What she discovered made her angry but also gave her ideas. The aliens talked about law and order, but criminal organizations operated freely in most of their territory. Pirate fleets attacked merchant ships while alien governments argued about jurisdiction. Slave traders moved millions of people between planets while the Galactic Council debated whether to do anything about it. The aliens were not just arrogant, they were also incompetent. They had vast fleets and advanced technology, but they could not, or would not use their power to solve basic problems. Their bureaucracy was so complicated that nothing ever got done. Criminal networks had grown so large that they practically controlled entire sectors of space. Haewon realized that this gave humans a huge opportunity. The aliens expected Earth to hide and wait for permission to rejoin galactic society, but what if humans simply started solving the problems that the aliens could not handle? What if Earth began cleaning up the galaxy without asking for anyone's permission? She brought her idea to Admiral Yuanwu, who listened carefully and then smiled for the first time in months. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of begging to be accepted back into alien politics, humans would prove their worth by doing what the aliens could not do. The plan began with careful preparation. Human intelligence networks mapped every major criminal organization in alien space. They identified the locations of pirate bases, slave trading posts, and corruption networks. The information was detailed and complete in ways that alien intelligence services had never achieved. Captain Minsu commanded the first strike team that left Earth 6 months after the failed peace talks. His ship was small and fast and carried weapons that could destroy targets much larger than itself. His crew had trained for months, learning to work together like parts of a single machine. Their first target was a pirate base in the Outer Rim territories. The criminals had been raiding merchant ships for years while the local alien government claimed they could not find the base. Human satellites had located it within days of starting their search. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. The pirate base had shields and weapons that should have protected it from any assault. But human tactics and technology turned the defenses into weaknesses. The pirates never had a chance to send a distress signal before their base was completely destroyed. Similar operations began happening across alien space. Small human task forces appeared wherever criminals thought they were safe. They struck without warning, eliminated their targets completely, and vanished before anyone could respond. The attacks were so quick and efficient that most aliens assumed they were the work of some new alien species. Back on Earth, the shipyards continued their work. Around the clock, more ships joined the growing fleet that would soon change the balance of power in the galaxy. The aliens still thought humans were hiding in shame, but humanity was actually preparing to teach the galaxy what real civilization looked like. Dr. Minho stood in his laboratory looking at the latest test results. Human technology was now superior to alien designs in almost every category. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had become the most advanced civilization. In known space, the aliens would learn soon enough that their biggest mistake was underestimating human determination and creativity, but by then it would be too late to stop what was coming. The first sign that something had changed came through a panicked distress signal from the outer rim territories. Captain Grelka of the Karathi merchant vessel C. Wind was screaming into his communication device as his ship drifted powerless through space. His cargo hold had been raided by pirates just hours before, but that was not why he was terrified. The pirates are all dead, he kept repeating over and over. One ship destroyed all 12 of theirs. I have never seen anything like it. Galactic. Council Chairman Veltar received the report 3 days later along with sensor data that made no sense according to everything the Council knew about space warfare. The attacking vessel had appeared from nowhere, destroyed an entire pirate fleet in less than 4 minutes, and vanished without leaving any trace of its identity. The unknown ship moved faster than any vessel in the galactic databases. Its weapons cut through pirate shields like they were made of paper. Most disturbing was the complete silence throughout the entire attack. The mystery ship never responded to communication attempts from either the pirates or the merchant vessel. Intelligence analyst Kexnori sat in his office surrounded by reports that were starting to form a very strange pattern. Similar incidents were happening across alien space. Unknown vessels were appearing at sites where criminals operated. They struck without warning, eliminated their targets with impossible efficiency, and disappeared before anyone could identify them. The attacks always followed the same pattern. The unknown ships never harmed innocent civilians or legitimate merchant vessels. They only targeted pirates, slavers, and other criminal organizations, but their technology and tactics were unlike anything any known species used. Kexnori spread star charts across his desk and marked every location where these mysterious attacks had occurred. The pattern was clear. Someone was systematically hunting down and destroying criminal networks that had operated freely for decades. The unknown force possessed detailed intelligence about illegal operations and the military capability to eliminate them. The Threx Collective lost an entire slave trading operation in the Kepler sector. The attackers had not only freed thousands of slaves, but had also transmitted detailed evidence of government corruption to news networks across the galaxy. High-ranking Threx officials were shown taking bribes from slave traders, and the scandal was threatening to destroy their government more. Reports flooded in from across council space. A pirate stronghold that had terrorized shipping lanes for 30 years was found completely destroyed with no survivors. A criminal syndicate that controlled illegal gambling operations on 15 planets simply vanished overnight along with all their facilities and personnel. The most shocking incident occurred in Nexari space, where a corruption network involving government officials had been exposed and eliminated. The unknown attackers had somehow obtained financial records that proved dozens of Nexari leaders were stealing money meant for planetary defense. The evidence was so detailed and complete that mass arrests followed. Within days, Chairman Veltar called an emergency council session to address what was clearly becoming a major crisis. None of the member species recognized the attacking vessel's technology or tactics. The ships appeared to be of unknown design, but their effectiveness was undeniable. The Zephyrin Republic Delegate raised a disturbing possibility. What if these attacks are not random? What if someone is deliberately targeting our weaknesses to destabilize our governments? The suggestion sent ripples of fear through the council chamber. Each species began reviewing their own territories for signs of these mysterious operations. They discovered that the unknown force had been active everywhere but had somehow avoided detection until their targets were already destroyed. Korathi Admiral Flexstar studied the sensor data from dozens of attacks and reached a conclusion that no one wanted to hear. These ships show tactical knowledge that suggests extensive intelligence gathering. Someone has been watching us for months, possibly years, learning our weaknesses and planning these operations. The Council demanded answers, but none of their intelligence services could identify the attackers. The mystery ships used technology that seemed familiar, yet advanced beyond what any known species possessed. Their weapons were more efficient than standard designs. Their shields absorbed damage that should have destroyed them, and their speed made pursuit impossible. Fear began to spread through the galactic community as more criminal organizations were eliminated. The unknown force was clearly working from detailed intelligence about illegal activities that even government agencies did not possess. Someone knew everything about the criminal networks that had plagued the galaxy for decades. The Vortani Empire lost 3 major pirate bases in a single day. The attacks were coordinated with precision that suggested a large, organized force was behind the operations. But how could such a force exist without any of the galactic powers knowing about it? Nori made a discovery that changed everything as he reviewed communication logs from the attack sites. The mystery ships had been broadcasting on frequencies that were not used by any known alien species, but the frequencies were in the range that one particular species did use. A species that had been silent for months. He brought his findings to Chairman Veltar, who studied the data with growing alarm. The energy signatures were not exactly human, but they were close enough to suggest a connection. The tactical approaches used by the unknown vessels showed creativity and adaptability that matched human military thinking. But how could humans have developed such advanced technology in just a few months? The species that had walked out of the peace talks supposedly lacked the industrial capacity to build a fleet capable of these operations. Their technology had seemed primitive compared to established galactic civilizations. The answer came when a Nexari patrol ship managed to get close enough to one of the mystery vessels to record detailed sensor readings. The ship design was definitely human, but incorporated improvements that made it far superior to anything Earth had possessed. During the peace talks, Chairman Veltar stared at the sensor data that proved what he had hoped was impossible. The humans who had been dismissed as primitive and irrelevant had somehow become the most effective military force in the galaxy. They were systematically destroying criminal networks that the established powers had been unable or unwilling to eliminate. The implications were staggering. If humans could conduct operations of this scale and sophistication, then everything the Galactic Council believed about Earth was wrong. The species they had treated as backward inferiors had been preparing for something that none of the alien civilizations had anticipated. More disturbing was the realization that humans were not asking for permission or seeking approval for their actions. They were simply solving problems that the galactic community had failed to address. The criminal organizations that had operated with impunity for decades were being eliminated by a species that the Council had considered too young and inexperienced to matter. Nori finished his report with a conclusion that sent shock waves through the galactic leadership. The humans are not hiding in their home system as we assumed. They have been actively working to clean up problems that we have ignored. They are demonstrating capabilities that exceed most of our member species. Chairman Veltar looked at the star charts showing the locations of human operations and realized that Earth had become a major power in galactic affairs. Whether the Council recognized it or not, humans were already shaping the future of civilized space. The species that had walked away from peace talks was coming back, but they would not be asking for permission this time. Within days of Captain Hay-1, presentation ships from dozens of species began arriving in Earth orbit. The same aliens who had treated humans as inferior children now waited in long lines for the chance to speak with human leaders. The orbital Traffic control system that had once handled a few dozen ships per month was now managing hundreds of arrivals every day. President Sora stood in the observation deck of the new diplomatic station that orbited Earth like a gleaming jewel. The structure rivaled the grandest alien facilities, but its design was uniquely human. Clean lines and functional beauty that spoke of a species that valued both efficiency and elegance. The station had been built in secret during the months following the failed peace talks. The Korathi delegation arrived first, led by the same ambassador who had laughed at human diplomats 6 months earlier. Ambassador Grelko now approached with the respectful bearing of someone who had learned that his previous assumptions were dangerously wrong. His gills fluttered with nervous energy as he waited to meet with human officials. President Sora received him in a conference room that overlooked Earth through massive transparent walls. The blue and green planet turned slowly below them, a constant reminder of human achievement and determination. Ambassador Grelko seemed unable to look away from the sight of a world that had become the center of galactic power. We wish to apologize for our previous conduct, he began with words that came slowly and painfully. The Korathi Republic now understands that we misjudged human capabilities. We hope to establish new relations based on mutual respect. President Sora listened politely, but her expression remained neutral. The time for easy forgiveness had passed when the aliens chose to treat humanity as primitive inferiors. What exactly does your government propose? She asked. The Korathi delegation had come prepared with trade agreements that offered terms far more favorable than anything they had suggested during the original peace talks. They wanted access to human technology and security services in exchange for resources and information about other alien species. Dr. Minho demonstrated some of humanity-enhanced technology to selected alien scientists in a laboratory that had been built specifically for diplomatic purposes. The improvements to energy systems, weapons technology, and faster-than-light travel surprised even the most advanced species present. The Vortani scientist who examined the improved power cells could not hide his amazement. Your manufacturing techniques have pushed our designs beyond theoretical limits, he admitted. How did you achieve such precision with common materials? Dr. Minho smiled as he explained the human approach to engineering. We looked at your technology and asked ourselves how it could be better. Your species perfected these designs over thousands of years, but you stopped innovating. Humans never stopped trying to improve. The alien scientists exchanged glances that spoke of species who had become comfortable with their achievements. Human civilization was young, but it possessed something that older civilizations had lost: the drive to constantly seek better solutions. Admiral Yanwu revealed the true scope of Earth military capabilities to a gathering of alien military leaders in a secure briefing room. The presentation showed not just the ships that had appeared at the Council station, but the entire fleet that had been constructed in hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. The numbers were staggering. Earth now possessed more advanced warships than most individual council members, and their technology gave them significant advantages in any potential conflict. The alien military leaders who had once dismissed human forces as primitive now found themselves studying human tactics and asking for cooperation agreements. The most shocking revelation came when Admiral Yanwu showed them recordings of human military exercises. The coordination between ships, the speed of tactical decisions, and the effectiveness of combined operations exceeded anything the alien observers had seen before. Your crews worked together like parts of a single organism, observed the Nexari fleet commander. How do you achieve such unity of purpose? Human military training emphasizes teamwork and adaptability, Admiral Yanwu replied. We believe that individual excellence means nothing without the ability to work effectively with others. Trade Minister Jae-min outlined humanity's new economic proposals to delegations from across the galaxy. Earth offered to share technological improvements and provide security services, but the terms were very different from what had been discussed during the original peace talks. Humans would no longer accept unfair agreements or condescending treatment. Every partnership would be based on mutual benefit and respect. Species that wanted access to human innovations would have to prove their commitment to justice and effective governance. The Frex collective delegation found themselves in an impossible position. Their slave trading operations had been completely destroyed by human forces. And their government was facing internal rebellion, the evidence that humans had transmitted to Galactic News. Networks had exposed decades of corruption and criminal activity. Need your help to restore order, the Threx ambassador pleaded. Our economy is collapsing without the labor systems that your forces eliminated trade. Minister Jamin's response was cold and precise. Earth does not provide assistance to governments built on slavery. If your economy cannot function without forced labor, then perhaps it is time to build a better economy. The moral authority that humans had gained through their actions against criminal organizations gave their words tremendous power. Species across the galaxy were being forced to examine their own practices and make difficult choices about their future. The Zephyrin Republic discovered that their expansion plans were being quietly countered by human-backed alliances. Planets that had been targeted for annexation were now under the protection of Earth. Military forces, the Zephyrins, who had dominated their region of space for centuries, suddenly found themselves isolated and outnumbered. Even more disturbing for the established powers was the growing coalition of species that had been ignored or marginalized by the Galactic Council. These smaller civilizations were now forming alliances with Earth and gaining access to human technology and protection. President Sora addressed this new coalition in a ceremony that was broadcast across the galaxy. The speech was simple, but its implications were revolutionary. The age of being told what to do by species who claim superiority through size alone is ending, she declared. Every civilization deserves respect regardless of how many planets they control. The words resonated with billions of beings who had been dismissed as unimportant by the galactic establishment. Human leadership was not based on threats or demands, but on demonstrated competence and moral clarity. Within months, the political landscape of the galaxy had been completely transformed. The traditional powers found themselves competing for human attention, while previously ignored species gained influence through their associations with Earth. Chairman Veltar watched from his crystal office as ships departed daily for Earth, carrying delegations seeking partnerships with the new galactic power. The council station that had once been the center of civilized space was becoming increasingly irrelevant as real decisions were being made in human space. The Nexari Empire faced the most difficult adjustment of all. Their entire identity was built on being the oldest and most advanced civilization in the galaxy, but humans had proven that age and tradition were less important than innovation and determination. The crystalline beings who had ruled space for millennia now found themselves studying human methods and asking for guidance on problems they could not solve. Their massive fleets and ancient technology seemed primitive compared to human achievements. Most painful was the realization that humans had accomplished their transformation through cooperation rather than conquest. Earth had become powerful by solving problems and helping others, rather than by taking territory or demanding tribute to species that had walked out of peace. Talks had returned to reshape the galaxy, but they had done it by proving their worth rather than by forcing others to acknowledge their authority. The lesson was clear to anyone willing to learn it. Real power came from effectiveness, not from the ability to intimidate others. The massive human flagship emerged from hyperspace above the Galactic Council station like a metal mountain appearing in the sky. Captain, hey, one stood on the bridge watching the alien vessels scramble to respond to their arrival. The ship was 3 times larger than anything Earth had possessed during the failed peace talks, and its sleek design showed technology that should not have been possible for such a young species. Escort ships flanked the flagship in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed with armor that sensor scans could not penetrate. Weapons ports lined their sides in configurations that alien military experts did not recognize. The entire human fleet moved with precision that spoke of extensive training and superior coordination. Admiral Yanwu activated the communication system that connected his ship to every screen and speaker. Throughout the council station, his image appeared in the council chamber, where alien delegates were gathering in emergency session. His uniform bore new insignia that none of them had seen before, and his bearing showed confidence backed by demonstrated power. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, he said in a voice that carried authority without arrogance, we request permission To address the assembly, we believe there are matters of mutual interest to discuss, Chairman. Veltar found himself in an impossible position. The same humans who had stormed out of peace talk 6 months ago were now commanding a fleet that dwarfed most individual species' military forces. The sensor readings from their ships showed technology that exceeded anything in the Council databases. The chamber buzzed with frantic whispers as delegates tried to understand what they were seeing. Some species had intelligence reports about the mysterious attacks on criminal organizations, but none had imagined that humans were responsible. The Earth that had seemed primitive and irrelevant had somehow become a major galactic power. Captain HFY entered the council chamber accompanied by an honor guard, wearing armor that looked both functional and impressive. Her confident stride and professional bearing commanded respect from beings who had ruled space for centuries. The same species they had dismissed as inexperienced children were now demonstrating mastery of galactic affairs. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with detailed intelligence files that made several alien delegates gasp in recognition. The data showed criminal organizations that had operated in secret for decades with information so complete that it included financial records, communication logs, and operational details. For the past 6 months, Captain HFY announced, human forces have been conducting operations to eliminate threats that the Council has been unable or unwilling to address. The display showed images that told a story of systematic destruction of galactic crime networks, pirate bases reduced to floating debris, slave trading posts, abandoned and empty criminal syndicate headquarters, destroyed so completely that not even foundations remained. We have freed over 2 million beings from illegal bondage, she continued as the holographic images showed liberated slaves being transported to safety. We have eliminated 47 major criminal organizations and disrupted corruption networks on 32 council worlds. The aliens sat in stunned silence as the scope of human operations became clear. While the council had been focused on territorial disputes and trade negotiations, humans had been solving problems that had plagued civilized space for generations. The coordination and resources required for such operations suggested that Earth had undergone a complete transformation. Karathi delegate, who had laughed at human diplomats months earlier, now found his gills fluttering with nervous anxiety. How is this possible? He asked in a voice that shook slightly. Your species lacked the technology for operations of this scale. Captain HFY smiled, and the expression was not entirely friendly. We learned much from our time observing galactic civilizations, she replied. The technology you shared with us during trade negotiations was quite educational. The Minho stepped forward, carrying a device that looked like a standard alien energy core, but gave off readings that made the council scientists lean forward with interest. This is based on Vortani power cell design, he explained. But our manufacturing techniques have improved its efficiency by 40%. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. The aliens had shared what they considered primitive technology, never imagining that humans might improve upon designs that had been perfected over thousands of years. The condescending gifts meant to demonstrate alien superiority had become the foundation for human advancement. We also discovered that your approach to law enforcement has significant limitations. Captain HFY continued as the display showed star charts marking criminal activity across council space. Your bureaucracy prevents effective action against threats that require immediate response. The criticism stung because it was accurate. The Galactic Council had been aware of the criminal networks for decades, but political considerations had prevented decisive action. Criminal organizations operated freely while council members debated jurisdiction and procedure. Captain HFY gestured toward the display showing before and after images of regions where human forces had operated. The Kepler sector shipping lanes are now safe for the first time in 30 years. The outer rim slave trade has been eliminated completely. The Nexari corruption scandal has resulted in government reforms that will benefit millions of citizens. Admiral Yon Wu voice came through the communication system, adding weight to the presentation. Our species may be young, but we understand that problems require solutions, not endless discussion. We have demonstrated what can be accomplished when someone is willing to act. The Council chamber fell into complete silence as the implications became clear. Humans had not only developed superior technology, but had also shown superior results in addressing galactic problems. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had proven more effective than civilizations that had ruled space for millennia. Chairman Veltar struggled to find words that would restore some dignity to the council position, but his crystalline features showed the strain of confronting a reality that none of them had anticipated. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted without anyone realizing it was happening, Captain. Hey, one prepared to deliver the statement that would change everything. The holographic display showed the current state of galactic criminal activity compared to 6 months earlier. The improvement was dramatic and undeniable. We accomplished in 6 months what the Council has failed to achieve in 6 decades, she said with quiet finality. Perhaps it is time to reconsider who truly deserves a voice in galactic affairs. The words hung in the air like a challenge that none of the alien delegates could answer. They had spent centuries considering themselves the natural leaders of civilized space, but humans had just demonstrated superior capability in every area that mattered. The species they had underestimated was now teaching them lessons about effective governance. The Threx collective delegate made a weak attempt to salvage the situation. Your actions, while effective, were taken without proper authorization. The galactic community requires consultation before. Captain Haywan interrupted, with a gesture toward the display showing freed slaves and destroyed criminal networks. We consulted with the victims of crimes that your proper procedures failed to prevent. They seemed quite grateful for unauthorized assistance. The response silenced further objections because it highlighted the fundamental failure of the galactic system. The established powers had been so focused on maintaining their authority that they had forgotten their responsibility to protect the innocent. Admiral Yuan-Wu. Final transmission to the Council carried a message that would reshape galactic politics. Earth extends an invitation to species interested in effective solutions rather than endless debate. Our door is open to those ready to build a better galaxy. The human fleet began moving away from the station, leaving the alien delegates to contemplate a new reality. The species that had walked out of peace talks had returned not as supplicants seeking approval, but as leaders offering partnership to those wise enough to accept it. 6 months later, Chairman Veltar stood before the reconvened Galactic Council, but everything had changed. The chamber itself looked the same with its glowing crystal walls and floating displays, but the political landscape had been completely transformed. The seating arrangement now reflected new realities of power and influence. Ambassador Deho now carried the title of Secretary General for the Human Coalition and occupied a seat of honor that had been created specifically for Earth representation. The same man who had been dismissed as a primitive diplomat now commanded respect from beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. His allies filled nearly a third of the assembly chamber. Species that had been ignored for centuries were suddenly influential players in galactic politics. The Kepler Federation, the Outer Rim Alliance, and dozens of smaller civilizations had found their voices through partnership with humanity. The new galactic charter reflected this shift in power. Criminal organizations now faced coordinated multi-species task forces equipped with human technology and trained in human tactics. The old system where pirates and slavers operated freely while governments debated jurisdiction had been replaced with immediate effective action. Secretary General Deho addressed the assembly with quiet confidence that came from demonstrated success rather than empty threats. The human approach to galactic problems has proven effective. He stated simply, we invite all species to join us in building a civilization based on justice rather than politics. The results spoke for themselves. Shipping lanes that had been terrorized by pirates for decades were now safe. Trade routes that had been controlled by criminal syndicates were open to legitimate commerce. Entire sectors of space that had been lawless frontier regions now enjoyed peace and prosperity. Captain Haywan commanded joint task forces that included ships from dozens of species all working together under human leadership. The diversity of the fleets was remarkable. Karathi vessels with their organic curves flew alongside angular Nexari ships and sleek Zephyrin cruisers. What made the cooperation possible was human insistence on merit-based command structures. Species that contributed effective personnel and resources gained influence regardless of their size or traditional status. The old system, where ancient civilizations automatically held authority, had given way to competence-based leadership. The transformation was most visible in the elimination of galactic slavery. The trade in sentient beings that had persisted for millennia, despite council resolutions, was now extinct. Human forces had not only destroyed the infrastructure but had also created rehabilitation programs for victims and economic alternatives for worlds that had depended on forced labor. Dr. Minho new research facilities welcomed students from across the galaxy, but the curriculum was uniquely human in its approach rather than simply teaching technical skills. The academies emphasized creativity, problem-solving, and ethical decision-making. The alien students struggled at first with human teaching methods that encouraged questioning established knowledge and seeking innovative solutions. Species that had spent centuries perfecting traditional approaches found it difficult to embrace the experimental mindset that drove human advancement, but those who adapted discovered capabilities they had never known they possessed. A young Threx engineer named Colset created a new type of shield generator that was more efficient than anything his species had developed in 1,000 years. A Nexari scientist named Velnara found ways to grow food in environments that had been considered impossible to cultivate. The educational exchange worked both ways, as humans learned from alien expertise in fields where other species had centuries of experience. But the human approach of combining knowledge from multiple sources and pushing beyond established limits was revolutionizing every field of study. President Sora established the Galactic Ethics Council with representatives from species across the known galaxy. The organization was tasked with developing standards for interspecies relations that emphasized dignity and mutual respect rather than power and exploitation. The Ethics Council faced immediate challenges as they worked to address problems that had been ignored for generations: the treatment of artificial intelligences, the rights of genetically modified beings, and the responsibilities of advanced species toward less developed civilizations were all subjects that required careful consideration. What made the Council effective was its human leadership approach of focusing on practical solutions rather than theoretical debates. When the Vortani Empire was discovered to be experimenting on sentient creatures, the response was swift and decisive. The experiments were shut down, the victims were provided medical care, and the researchers faced justice. The speed and effectiveness of the response sent a clear message across the galaxy: the new order would not tolerate abuse of the vulnerable regardless of which species was responsible. Traditional diplomatic immunity and governmental sovereignty would not protect those who violated basic standards of decency. Admiral Yonwu restructured galactic defense forces around human principles of rapid response and coordinated action. The old system, where each species maintained separate military forces with conflicting command structures, was replaced by integrated task forces trained to work together. The new military doctrine emphasized protection of civilians and elimination of threats rather than territorial conquest or political intimidation. Criminal organizations that had operated with impunity for decades discovered that the reformed galactic forces could respond to threats faster than the criminals could relocate their operations. The most dramatic example came when the Outer Rim Syndicate attempted to re-establish their slave trading network in a remote sector. The criminal organization had rebuilt their infrastructure in secret and believed they could resume operations before anyone could respond. They were wrong. A joint human-led task force detected the illegal activity within hours and eliminated the entire operation before a single victim could be transported. The speed and thoroughness of the response discouraged other criminal groups from attempting similar activities. Trade Minister Jamin negotiated new economic agreements that emphasized fair exchange and mutual benefit rather than exploitation of weaker species. The trade networks that had enriched powerful civilizations at the expense of resource-rich but technologically limited worlds were restructured to ensure equitable partnerships. The economic reforms faced resistance from established interests who had profited from the old system, but human moral authority made opposition difficult to justify. Species that complained about losing unfair advantages found themselves isolated as the galactic community embraced principles of justice and equality. Chairman Veltar found himself presiding over a council that was more effective than it had ever been in its long history. Decisions that had once required years of debate were now made quickly and implemented successfully. The old system of endless discussion and political maneuvering had been replaced by human-style focus on results. The Nexari leader, who had once commanded respect through ancient tradition, now found himself learning from humans who had been spacefaring for less than a century. The crystalline being's pride struggled with the reality that his supposedly superior civilization had been surpassed by young, determined newcomers, but gradually even the most resistant alien leaders began to appreciate the benefits of human leadership. The galaxy was safer, more prosperous, and more just than it had been in living memory. The problems that had seemed unsolvable for generations were being addressed with human efficiency and determination. Secretary General Deho's final statement to the Council captured the complete transformation that had occurred. "We left your peace talks because we were not treated as equals," he reminded the Assembly. "We returned not seeking your approval but offering partnership. To those ready to build a better galaxy together." The words carried weight because they were backed by demonstrated achievement. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force but had earned leadership through superior results. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had become the teachers of civilized behavior. "The choice, as always, remains yours," Deho concluded, but his confident smile showed that he already knew what most species would decide. The galaxy had learned that dismissing human determination was the greatest mistake any civilization could make.